With Season 9 right around the corner, I've been really kind of concerned about the fact that we haven't had any balance changes. I understand the reason for this is because we have a majors coming up, but that's actually not a very common thing to do in a lot of games. They will continuously push out balance changes because the people that you need to appease is more than just that 0.001% of players who are competing in the majors. You have a ton of player base that is still looking for balance changes and meta shakeups. And the only game I know that does this is Counter-Strike, and for the most part, they don't really do too many balance changes in general, so it's not really much of a surprise at this point that they wouldn't be balancing before a majors. Let's look at every class and see what weapons and gadgets, specializations might need some change. When it comes to light, I think the cloaking device, the only change that I would make is making sure that across the board, whatever your cosmetics are, that the cloak effect is universal. If you didn't know already, the cosmetics of your character actually affect the way that cloak works on you, so you can actually nerf yourself by having some crazy cosmetics. So that would be one tweak that I think could bring cloaking device a little bit more into the spotlight. When it comes to grappling hook, I think grappling hook could potentially use either 2 charges with a slower cooldown or just a faster cooldown with 1. Grappling hook has always felt like it just needs a little bit of love to get into the meta, but as it stands, it really only seems to be meta in the China region. When it comes to weapons, I think the 9.3R could definitely get looked into a little bit more because they've made so many minor tweaks to this, and it went from completely useless to what people consider overpowered. And the TTK was actually the same for a few patches. The only thing that really shifted the meta was when they added 3 extra bullets to it, and people actually tried it and realized how strong it was and how fast the TTK was. The 9.3R is definitely one of those tricky weapons to get right, and I think my suggestion would be for them to increase the delay between each burst by a little bit so that the TTK is a little bit slower, and they can tweak this by a very small amount until they get the right timing. When it comes to the dagger and the sword, I'm going to kind of lump these together because I'm not 100% sure. I don't think that they're that good, but I've also heard a lot of people complaining about how overpowered these are in my comments and in my Twitch chat, and that tends to be around quick play where it seems like there's a lot of them using that. I don't really play quick play too much outside of just finishing some of my challenges. So if any of you use the dagger or sword, feel free to comment below what changes you guys think the weapons need. When it comes to the bow, there's only one thing that I really want out of this, and I would really like to see the bow actually have better hit registration. There's a lot of times where I will hit somebody and there's an arrow sticking out of their face, but there was no damage that was dealt. And this has been pretty bad in some cases where there might have 2 or even 3 arrows in them that all dealt 0 damage. Something needs to be looked at with the hit registration here. Obviously, it is some sort of desync, but it is really frustrating and it's very obvious when you play the bow. For a lot of time, you'll notice this a lot. When it comes to the sniper, I think the whole mix between hit scan and non-hit scan definitely needs to be looked at again. I don't think it should have this projectile at the end, but I obviously understand that when it comes to power shift, this is kind of ruining that mode for a lot of people. So potentially either disabling it or having different balancing for the modes, if that is possible, might be the play. But this is forever going to be the bane of the power shift players, and I think it is a really big struggle for people who want to play cash out with this because no matter what, it seems like the balancing is always going to be a little bit scuffed because they have to accommodate for the other modes, and this weapon shines the most in terms of being a shit show for balancing in all the modes. When it comes to the V9S, I think the V9S across the board is one of the weapons that just isn't that good. When you look at like the pro scene or even the top players like in Ruby and stuff, this is basically a non-existent weapon. This is only good in the lower elos, and I think it's because people kind of look at the TTKs or they look at certain values of the weapon and just think that it is better than it really is. The damage drop-off is so fast and so forward that it basically just becomes useless at that point. At a certain point, a lot of weapons just sort of shine better, and it kind of has a similar issue to the XP right now, but even worse, where it's like where it's strong in close range, there's a lot of other things that do it better. The SH, the M26, the M11, even to a degree the dagger, sword, and the bow. So the V9S definitely doesn't really shine there, and then once you get into those mid-ranges, there's plenty of things that sort of outclass it, even the XP, the 9.3R, the M11. And obviously at longer ranges, this thing just really isn't putting up the numbers. So while on paper it looks like it's good, in reality it just isn't, and that's why a lot of the top players basically never use this. And the ones that have tried it out basically just put it away after a few games. Now I think there is potential there, and I don't really know what needs to happen, but I think adding some sort of full auto feature for it might be a way to see where its balance truly lies. And you could even do this as an attachment. So instead of using a red dot, for example, you can now have a full auto V9S. This would allow you to always be able to hit that TTK cap without having to spam your finger while trying to aim up close. And this could be a good trade-off for the people who have mastered it and who do enjoy kind of clicking at the full max speed. They'll now get a red dot versus the people who can't. When it comes to the gadgets, I think Breach Charge only needs one change, and that would be to have the gas canister to trigger the fuse with one breach charge. I think that is kind of odd that the fire barrel does actually trigger the fuse with one charge, but gas doesn't. You need two, and it just becomes a little bit inconsistent. Now, having played breach charge so much, I feel like this is actually an extremely underrated pick, and I don't really want to change much else. That's the only thing that I think really needs change, because I'm always looking for fire barrels so that I can sort of make plays with the breach charge. And the gas just feels, just underwhelming because you kind of need two charges, and it means that you're limited on what else you can do. When it comes to Gateway, this is one of those things that I'm like, Gateway is potentially the most overpowered gadget in the entire game, but I don't want to nerf it because it's not really causing any issues. Nobody really has any issues with Gateway. It's a very well-made gadget, and the devs did a fantastic job on this. There's counterplay to it. It's useful for your team. It's useful for yourself. It's very legible if you're on the enemy team. It means you know what's happening, you know how to counterplay it. So for the most part, it's really well designed gadget. I don't really know if nerfing it would be the play. When it comes to Glitch Grenade, I would actually move this down to one charge with a slightly shorter cooldown. And the main reason is because I feel like if you were to balance the game and you see a lot more stuff like Dome Shield and Mesh, then the Glitch Grenades are going to gain a lot of value, and it's just going to be this constant back and forth. I don't think you really should have two anyways. I think spamming two can be a little bit of a cop-out for not landing your first one correctly. So I think one with a shorter cooldown was probably the play. When it comes to the Gravity Vortex, the biggest thing I would like to see is for the effect of the Gravity Vortex to be weakened on your own teammates. So if you or your teammates are caught in this vortex, you can still move around a little bit faster, you're not pulled as much. I think something like that could actually help bring it into the meta and maybe create some really interesting plays. I think it's really difficult to use this in solo queue because it's hard to coordinate with your team. Now, there's a lot of plays that you can do with this, and it's a really fun gadget. And for the most part, it's pretty easy to counter because you can simply just throw a Glitch Grenade at the effect and remove it right away. In the same that you can throw a Glitch Grenade at a Dome Shield, it will just instantly remove it. And since you can see the little base of the Gravity Vortex, you can shoot that. It makes it kind of tricky to throw it into proper spots. And with Winch so dominant in the meta, winching it away from a specific Gravity Vortex spot is obviously going to be a pretty easy and simple counter to it. I've been trying to get as clever as I can with these, but it definitely needs a little bit of love. The H+ Infuser definitely needs a little bit of a nerf. I think lowering the RPM of this could be a good way, but if you're ever shooting at someone and you're landing all headshots and you just see their health go up because they're getting H+ infused, it can be really frustrating. And I think just slowing the RPM so that you can still compete versus some people and potentially get certain kills that you otherwise wouldn't have would be the way to go. The H+ Infuser is definitely an S tier pick right now, and across the board, almost all meta lights are using it. It'd be nice to see this sort of tweaked a little bit. The Nullifier is one of these gadgets that I think is better than a lot of people put on, but it's also really easy to screw over your own team by nullifying the wrong person, especially if you nullify the heavy and then all of a sudden the heavy is able to close the gap and get real close to your medium, and then they come out of the nullification just instantly ready to burst them down. Sometimes it actually feels good to get nullified. So the Nullifier definitely needs to be tweaked a little bit here. And potentially adding the ability to actually nullify your teammates might be the play. Because like I said, when you get nullified, sometimes it does feel good. You can get a quick escape if they do it at the wrong time. So maybe being able to nullify your teammates might add a little bit more complexity to this. And then you can nullify your teammate to get out of a sticky situation. Especially if they get winched in and you instantly nullify that person, you could save their life. It could be a fun route for the devs to go down. When it comes to the Thermal Bore, I really want to see the fuse timer shorten. Whenever I shoot a wall, I feel like I'm staring at it for so long before it pops. People have pretty fast reaction time as it is. I mean, if you shoot a wall, the fuse, they're going to be able to look at it and get prepared and ready for it. I think just shortening it is the way. Allow you to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more reactive with this. Is going to add a lot more complexity to the game. Because the Thermal Bore, I think, has a lot of potential. It just needs a little bit of love. The Tracking Dart, I've suggested this before, but just add some sort of debuff other than just being able to see the target. For example, when you tracking dart somebody, maybe they can't be healed for the duration, or maybe they take 5% increased damage, or whatever it might be. Just something to kind of add a little bit more incentive to chase down and to actually hunt these people that you're tracking darting. For the most part, a lot of the way that we play it is we tracking dart people and then we just sit and hold and wait, and we're just delaying a push for about 15 seconds. It's difficult for us to properly push because they might just kind of hide. And for the most part, once you kind of see each other, the effect can be a little bit annoying. If they're going upstairs or whatever, and there's this delayed glitchy effect, sometimes it can screw up your aim. So just adding something else would be a good way to approach that. Now, when it comes to the medium build, we have Dematerializer, which I just want to kind of remove the delay. There's a bit of a delay in activating it and stuff, and I'm not a big fan of that. I think the 2 charges is okay, but the delay makes it feel so clunky. And while I loved using Dematerializer before and I understood that it was a little bit too strong, I think the current state of it just makes it less fun to play rather than just sort of balancing it. The Guardian Turret, I think what we need to see out of this is allow it to actually target people. So every time it shoots people, it will target them and there'll be like a little flash of an outline of them. That way you can use this sort of as a security camera as well as damaging the target. It'll be a little tweak, but I think it could go a long way to allowing you to help your teammates a little bit more with Guardian Turret. Because at the moment it does feel a bit like the selfish specialization, but I think it could be a little bit more useful for your team if they just added an effect like that. The Healing Beam I actually think is in a decent place right now. I don't really want to see this nerfed. I'd rather just see the Guardian Turret and the Dematerializer receive a little bit of love. When it comes to the weapons, I think the Cerberus needs to reapply its fire every time that you shoot. If you guys didn't know, if you shoot all 3 of them really fast, then the fire effect basically just ends after the first time that it gets applied. So I think it just needs to reapply the fire every time so that spam shooting the Cerberus isn't really a, debuff to you, and you could still kill certain targets with a full 3 pump by, actually landing every pellet. Again, the dual blades and the riot shield, I'm going to leave this up to you guys in the comments if you guys have any suggestions. I think these 2 weapons are potentially some of the worst melee weapons in the game. I think actually riot shield does have a little bit of a place and a certain playstyle, so I might be wrong about that. Dual blades is definitely very easy to deal with though. And I will say for the most part, I think this class relatively is quite balanced. I think a lot of the weapons feel pretty good, and the ones that don't feel the best, something like the Model 1887, does have a place in some places. It is a little bit niche. I just don't really want this back in the meta again. When it was hard meta, obviously people were not happy at all. I've never seen people rally together so hard to get a weapon nerfed. And I think a lot of the auto weapons and other weapons on this class are all kind of being picked up in the meta. We see the AKM, the CB01, the FAMAS, the FCAR, the Revolver. We even saw the Pike in pro play recently to really good success. The P90, since it's banned, it's really hard for me to judge at the moment, but from my experience with it, it really didn't feel too bad. But I feel like it doesn't really suit a sort of healing playstyle, and since the Healing Beam is the meta, the P90 feels like it doesn't really suit that very well, but it does work quite well with the Materializer or even Guardian Turret, where you might be a little bit more brawling and close range oriented. When it comes to gadgets, I think the Breach Drill is one of these things that I don't really know what they need to do with it. It's just a little bit weird. I think maybe giving us 2 charges and kind of letting us go crazy with it for a little bit and see where the balance actually sits could be a good way. So I think starting with 2 charges or even shortening the cooldown by a little bit so that we can, use it a little bit more and try to push the potential of this. But I think since it's been out, basically nobody's really touching it. So it's really hard to see where this weapon's actually going to sit when nobody's really testing it. So I think 2 charges is the way to go, and maybe we get some more data on how it is being used and how successful it is. The Data Reshaper it's such a tricky thing because the Data Reshaper is actually very good in some situations. It's a pretty hard counter to a lot of gadgets, but unless those gadgets are in the meta, then you can't really data reshape them. So it's always going to be this weird niche pick that probably will never be in the meta, but it should be in a lot of people's back pocket in order to counter certain playstyles. When it comes to Zipline, I just want to see the bug fixed. I mean, I think Zipline is obviously a pretty good pick, but the weird bug where you sort of wiggle and shake on it is, not the most enjoyable to play into. So I think they just need to fix that bug, and we might see a little bit more Zipline. And when it comes to heavy for the specializations, the way that they work feels a little bit awkward to me. So there's Charge and Slam, Goo Gun, Mesh, and the Winch Claw. The Charge and Slam is sort of a counter to Goo Gun and Mesh Shield, but it gets countered by Winch. The Goo Gun is a relatively decent counter to Winch Claw, but can get countered, obviously, by Charge and Slam. And then the Mesh Shield doesn't really counter anything. And it gets countered by Winch Claw, it gets countered by Charge and Slam. I mean, maybe you could say that it counters Goo Gun, but not really. And then obviously the Winch being able to counter both Charge and Slam and Mesh just leaves Winch Claw as obviously one of the better picks. So I think a way to potentially quickly balance these is just allow Mesh Shield to block Winch Claw. If you hold up a Mesh, then you block Winch. That way there's sort of this pattern of things sort of countering and being countered by another thing. And then maybe we'll see a more balanced specialization pick versus basically everybody using Winch Claw with the odd person using Goo Gun, at least in NA and EU. Now for the weapons, the BFR Titan is obviously one that I think a lot of people have been asking for a nerf to. I don't really know what the best approach is here, but I think reducing the range is probably the best pick. It's not really that fun when you have basically a heavy with a sniper rifle. The KS-23, personally, I don't really like the whole half hit scan, half projectile. I would rather just have the KS-23 be wholly a projectile, and then they can look into other tweaks, such as giving it 104 damage, maybe speeding up the cycle animation between shots, or allowing you to cancel it a little bit early without feeling punished. Like if you melee or something at the end of the cycle, you still have to go through the entire cycle again, which can make the weapon feel very, very clunky if you're not used to it. The Lewis gun definitely needs a little bit of love. I'm not too sure what it would be, potentially just a little bit of RPM, because I think if you buff up the damage, it's just going to become a little bit too strong. But a small tweak to RPM, like maybe 5, 10, 20 RPM, could allow them to fine-tune balance this weapon. When it comes to the minigun, I think that the minigun will become a lot stronger if the Winch Claw gets a little bit more countered. Like if you can use Mesh Shield to counter the Winch Claw, then the minigun could potentially be right back in the meta. Because a big thing holding it back was the Winch Claw. Get those max range winches on a minigun, the stun duration is going to mean that they have to reset part of their spool, which means that you can just burst them down before they're able to start shooting back. The M60 also needs a little bit of love, and I'm not too sure what this needs. Again, maybe a slower RPM with more damage, or maybe a little bit better range. I don't really know what it needs, but the M60 and the Lewis both are kind of in a similar boat where both their balancing is very similar, but they're both just kind of behind in a lot of the meta picks. And it'd be nice to see them shine again. The MGL has been needing a little bit of love for quite some time, and I think adding a right click to it where you can sort of hold right click and then let go of it to make it blow up in the middle of the air means that your RPM is going to be a lot slower, but at least those people hitting jump pads and stuff, you'll have some sort of counter too. This was suggested by Andrews Town, and I think it's a pretty good concept that doesn't, make the weapon overpowered, but it allows it to have some form of capability to still hold its own during those really difficult to deal with situations like people hitting jump pads or people flying through the air. And it would add a lot of skill to the weapon because landing those shots would be incredibly difficult. Now the Sledge I actually think is in a relatively decent spot when you compare it to the other melees, but when you compare it to the rest of the game, it's still a little bit behind. And I've said this before, but I think a lot of the melee weapons need to have their quick melee removed and added to be something else. So instead of having just a regular elbow quick melee like the guns have, I think the melee weapon should have their own unique quick melee option that maybe uses the back of the weapon, or maybe it's a different swing, or maybe it's a charge, or whatever it might be. I think this could add a little bit more complexity and a little bit more interest to the melee weapons and really make them stand out. For the spear, I just really want to see the right click become a throw or be able to cancel it early. Maybe just one spin, and if you keep spamming it, you'll do the whole spin, but not locked into this full animation where you have to emote cancel to get out of. But I mean, really, I just want to see the ability to throw the spear. I don't know why the right click is not a throw. That would be so cool. Now let's look at the gadgets. I think the anti-grav cube is just super slept on, and a lot of the pros that are using it to pretty good success. I think the anti-grav cube is a fantastic gadget, and I don't really think it needs a buff like a lot of people might think. And I think for the most part, this class actually does have a lot of options. A lot of the gadgets that are specific to the heavy build are pretty strong. Now let's look at some of the gadgets that every class gets to have. When it comes to flashbang, I want to see even more reduction to teammates being flashed, and potentially a different indicator on it, because I think that is one of the biggest things that's, baiting people with this. When I use this a lot, I would get a hit marker, then I would push in just to be instantly shot at and fully tracked. And I'm like, what? And then I watch the kill cam and I'm like, yeah, they're not even that blinded. They just have like a little bit of the blind effect, but not enough. I think they just need to add a yellow hit marker or like a crit hit marker when you fully flash somebody so that you know, okay, this I can fully go in off of, versus just a hit marker for everything. And then you just feel like, oh, well, I just kind of got baited here. I thought I hit them, but I really did. So an indicator and a slight reduction in the effect on your teammates could be pretty good. Frag grenade needs a little bit of love. Maybe just a shorter cooldown could be really good. We don't have to go back to 2 charges, but just reduce the cooldown by quite a bit so that you can spam it a little bit more. As it stands, it's a little bit underwhelming, and the indicator, the noise, the fact that it's only 1 charge, the longer cooldown just kind of kills this gadget. It's just really not that good. The gas grenade, I think, is okay, but it has pretty quick counters. If there's any fire in that area, or if there's somebody using a flamethrower or whatever, like these things just instantly get removed. They have such a hard counter that it's kind of frustrating. But I think one thing that could potentially help it is, you know, maybe if you know that you're not facing a flamethrower, you can bring it in if it's in your reserves and allow it to actually impact on shield. So if this hits a mesh, if this hits a dome shield, maybe this hits a gravity vortex or whatever, that it just instantly pops and just makes a cloud within or behind that shield, the same way that like a glitch would sort of impact on those things. Because that's been the biggest thing that's kind of been countering it for me, is like, if I'm throwing it and then they instantly throw down a shield and then it just bounces off, it just becomes completely useless. So I feel like allowing it to counter those things in the same way that the glitch kind of counters it could be nice. Keep in mind, with all the sustain and healing in the meta, you can kind of just live through a lot of the gas anyways. So you'd still need to push, you'd still need to do something about it. But, I mean, as it stands, the gas grenade is one of the worst picks, so I think that could give it a little bit of love. The goo grenade definitely needs to go down to 1 charge. I mean, they can shorten the cooldown maybe a little bit, but the 2 charges is kind of getting ridiculous. And with a lot of the classes, even sometimes lights bringing it, but we see a lot of heavies, a lot of mediums bring this. There's just grenade spam everywhere, and it makes it extremely hard to push when somebody's going for a force. They just winch it off into a corner, spam 4 goo grenades, and then it becomes a nightmare to try and get through. So making it reduced to 1 charge would be nice. Maybe allowing goo to take a little bit more explosive damage. I mean, an RPG doesn't even remove a goo, which feels a little bit ridiculous. When it comes to the pyro grenade, I think just allowing it to have a bigger surface would be a good way. I mean, for the most part, the cooldown and the way that it works isn't really the problem. I think it's just the fact that it's such a small area and it does basically no damage. So making it a bigger area of fire would be nice. And then on top of that, allowing it to have more initial impact. Like if you throw this directly at somebody, you barely do any damage. You could throw this directly, hit somebody, and then they just keep running in a straight line, and you might do maybe like 20, 25 damage. It's just not worth it. You might as well just shoot at them during that time while you're throwing it, and you would have dealt more damage. The pyro grenade, in my opinion, is potentially like the worst gadget in the game. When it comes to the smoke grenade, I think that the fact that we don't have thermal vision is sort of making this not as impactful and just feel a little bit weird. When people do bring it in for the steals, it feels kind of annoying because there's not many counters to it. I think smoke grenade is going to be very tricky for them to kind of balance, and if we are getting thermal vision back, I don't want to speak too soon on how they should balance this, because as it currently stands, it was really only a thing that people paired with thermal vision, or they paired with like goo gun on a heavy to go for some cheesy steals during a cash out round. All right, if you guys have any suggestions on where you guys want to see the balance go for Season 9, feel free to suggest it below. As I mentioned at the beginning, I do a lot of studying on the pro scene, and I am a coach for a pro team. So a lot of my opinions are obviously going to be based in a little bit more of a higher elo experience. I'm always curious to see what you guys feel like, especially for the people that are in a lower elo. I understand the meta is completely different, but since I don't really play within that, I'm a little bit less familiar, and I understand certain things that I might want buffed or nerfed might be something that is really crucial to the meta that you are usually in. So obviously this is just a fun discussion. This isn't meant to be too serious. Ultimately, I think that the devs should make their own decision and not base it off of any one particular person's opinion, but everybody as a whole expressing their opinion is the best way for them to get feedback and to get data so that they can figure out what the best course of action is. If you've enjoyed this content, feel free to subscribe. Check me out live on Twitch if you're not already over there. Join the Finals University. There should be a link below in the description. It's the best place to learn and improve at the game, along with if you're interested in getting coaching, that is where you will figure out how to do that. Now go abuse everything that's overpowered before it gets nerfed, and I will see you in the finals.